Hmm. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Good morning, everyone. My YouTube live seems to be having some complications. So let's try it again. Hope everybody is doing well. You can go ahead and share while we have a moment so we can figure out what is going on. Oh my goodness. All right. It keeps saying it's stopping. Let's see. I might not be able to go on to YouTube this morning, so I may have to upload from here. Yep. All right. Nothing much I can do about that except upload it later, so I hope my YouTube people will come on this morning. Come on over. How's everybody doing? How is everybody doing? This is Relationship Wednesday. And I guess I'm going to have to address this since this is trending news. Go ahead and share. Because probably what I'm about to say is not going to make some people happy. And it's probably going to be controversial coming from me because I don't really spend a whole lot of time on this topic. But I have had a couple people send me, good morning, Lady Judy. Sorry about YouTube is not working right now. I think I know what it is. No YouTube today. I'm going to have to upload the video after we're done live. A couple of people have inboxed me and asked me, had I heard about Jill Scott? Now, I don't listen to secular music like that. I keep trying to tell people this. Of course, I know secular music, right? I mean, if you're in the world, you know of secular music. But there's just people I don't listen to. Jill Scott is one of them. I don't listen to a lot of people. Some people compare my singing style to India.Arie. I didn't know who India.Arie was. I had to actually go look her up because people kept comparing my musical sound to her. All right. But I don't listen to them. I don't listen to Erykah Badu. I don't listen to Jill Scott. I don't listen to India.Arie. No disrespect to them. It's just not my thing. I like to kind of keep my environment what it is for me. I grew up on 60s and 70s music, so I can tell when someone's sampling it, especially gospel singers. I can tell when they're sampling it in their quote unquote gospel music, but it's not my thing. So I got a couple of people inboxing me about Jill Scott, and I was like, well, I don't really listen to her, so I wouldn't know what's going on with her. Lord have mercy. Why did I click on the hashtag Jill Scott? That's all I'm going to say. Well, I'm going to say a couple more things, but I didn't even need to see it. Well, see, I thought it was actually some news, because people are sending me stuff all the time. And I was actually a little upset because I'm like, wait a minute. With all of the stuff going on, and of course, this is Relationship Wednesday, so this is going to fit right in with today, Relationship Wednesday. I said, with all the stuff going on in our community, you mean to tell me that the thing that is trending right now for the black community is not Jamel Roberson, okay? who was shot up by police while trying to assist the community and do something that the police could not do, which was hold a suspect down without killing them until the police got there, and then he himself was shot to death. That's not trending. It's not even something as uplifting and positive as Michelle Obama's new book. I think this trended more than her new book Becoming. Dealing with, what it's like to be a leader and what it's like to, be the wife of someone of the free world and all of that. No, we weren't talking about that. We were talking about how a woman handles a microphone. I got mad. I got a little upset at that because I was like, are you kidding me? With all the stuff going on in our community, this is what we're trending about? Like, really? Really? And then we get upset when other communities don't take us seriously. And then we get upset when people call Black women hypersexual and the B word and all of that. This is what's trending. Fellas, let me help you out. Okay? I'll give you a couple of little advice pointers this morning. I got to give y'all real talk. You all know this, right? Okay. Number one, if you are a believing man, none of the believing women want to hear you talking about Jill Scott today. All right? I'm just going to help some of the brothers out because some of y'all don't get it. No believing woman wants to see that on your timeline. I'm going to just tell you that. That's number one. Number two, please do not go around telling women that they need to learn from Jill Scott. Just don't do it. All right? What she does with her life and her microphone is her business. Don't do it. I'm trying to help the brothers this morning. Number three, do not consider a microphone for a Christmas present to your significant other, because you're going to get told off. Good morning, love. Don't do it. Okay? I'm just telling you, don't do it. All right? And the other part of that is, if you are a single man, the single women are paying attention to your objectifying of Jill Scott. They are. No, honey. Honey, you came in late. You're going to have to, you just don't worry about it, okay? The way that men are objectifying Jill Scott, that's problematic. It is. Prophet, you laughing, but I'm serious. The way that men are objectifying her is problematic. It is. And so some people think it's hilarious. Some people are like, well, she's always been that way. She's always done that at her shows. And now that she's advertising that side of herself to get more tickets and to drum up business for her concerts, people are like, well, she's always been that way. Well, that's nice. But people who don't know her music, some people are just turned off by you advertising yourself that way in order to get fans. Because the reality is, in this day and age, if that's what you're advertising, you're going to get some fans that you don't want. That's all I'm saying. So, again, with all of the stuff that's going on in our community, we can find something better to trend than that. And secondly, brothers, ladies are paying attention to your conversation around Jill Scott today. So, use wisdom. This is sad all the way around. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is. And what's even sadder, Prophet, is I see believing men having the most lewd things to say, which I find very interesting. Well, it is what it is. So, gentlemen, don't go rolling up on your significant other talking about you need to learn the skills from Jill, because you might get told off today. I'm just trying to help some of you. All right. What she wants to do in her bedroom is her business. But it's her business. And if you're a man, you would probably be wise not to comment on it. That's especially those of you who are in relationships. So I'm just trying to help some of the men out here who I see commenting. And I'm like, sir, you're married. That's number one. How about you worry about what your wife wants? Did I say that in the kindest way that I could? All right. So, trying to help some of us. But I was just like, what in the world? Why is this trending for the black community? And yeah, we gotta stop letting one little thing pull us off track. And the other piece of that is, seriously speaking, the other piece of that is sometimes I think things are put out in the media just to see where black community is. Like, I sometimes think things are put out in our community just to see where we are as a people. And if you can be distracted and waylaid, no pun intended, and your whole life be shifted by thinking with your bottom half and not with your upper half, then warfare wise, it's pretty easy to take your whole community off track. Because if that's what the men in your community are focused on, if their libido is leading them, then you just show the enemy that how easily your community can be taken off track. All we have to do is just throw something up about one of y'all favorite whatevers, and y'all and the men in your community who's supposed to be watching and protecting, the men in your community, their mind is gone because it's on their libido. Yep. So, again, nothing on Jill Scott, because apparently this is her modus operandi. This is what she does. But the reality is what she did exposed a lot of where our community's mind is. Does that make sense? All right. And so we are talking today about, we're continuing in Labor of Love, and we're still on the topic of sex education. All right. So we talked about last time how everybody agreed that there was no agreement on the subject of dating, that people are pretty much winging it, and that to be an adult today is to become responsible for determining the rules under which you would go out into the world and pursue a relationship. And we talked about the defenses people use, or the defenses that men were using when they got caught in misconduct, or when they got caught leading on more than one woman. They would say things like, I never lied to you. You must have misinterpreted the relationship. I never said that we were serious. All of these expressions. All right. So that's where we were. And we're going to hopefully finish up this chapter. It's pretty long. We might not finish it up, but let's try. All right. The writer says, I cannot have been the only child of the Clinton era to have stumbled on a porn website that was labeled as a White House website while doing my social studies homework. I remember clicking on a thumbnail after thumbnail in an Interns of the Month gallery, watching spray-tanned people and girls posed around a fake Oval Office materialize bit by bit. When my sister was searching for images of her favorite British pop stars, she accidentally typed "spicy girls" into Yahoo, and the search results made her run from the family computer. Still, cybering was considered the safest sex around during this time because of AIDS lurking in the alleyways of our life. It is probably no coincidence that this sea change comes on us at a time when this was happening, the writer for The Nation mused in 1993. Months later, the New York Times reiterated the point. Computer erotica appears to provide many people with a safe alternative to real personal relationships in a world where HIV is deadlier than computer viruses. This was in a book review. The book, The Joy of Cybersex, argued that the World Wide Web was a godsend for this reason. The author of it, Deborah Levine, has spent several years counseling college undergraduates at the Columbia University Health Education Program. Levine encouraged them to use their computers to do their flirting, to start online relationships, and to explore their fantasies without taking a real-world risk. The driving force behind sex in the 90s, whether you were partnered or single, was the human imagination. Enter the world of cybersex, the place where imaginations go wild. Anonymity is the rule and desire runs amok. Like earlier safe sex educators, Levine used multiple choice and fill-in-the-blank questionnaires to help readers take stock of what they wanted. She placed more emphasis on expanding your horizons than on safety. Online, you had nobody to protect, but the format looked almost the same. The chapter Overcoming Sexual Inhibitions, good morning, Franklin. The chapter Overcoming Sexual Inhibitions, for instance, started with a quiz intended to help you assess how uptight you were. Are you ready to embark on a mission to learn about the expansive range of sexual expression? Answer a few questions and find out. So, there were several questions that she would give to the people in order to determine what sites to introduce them to. She would let her readers know the sites and the language that they would need to thrive there. The pages she cited ran the gamut for tutorials for geeks and nerds to resources for free lovers and a service that connected heterosexual couples who were into cross-dressing. The chat abbreviations that she lists now seem so obvious that it is hard to remember that they once needed defining. But mastering them were critical. Decent webcam technology and the bandwidth needed to transmit high-quality images were still a few years off. In the interim, using the right expression at the right time was the only way to flirt and bond online. Like this book, the first issue of Wired magazine came out in 1993. It contained an article about a woman whose prolific activity transformed her from a paragon of shy and retiring womanhood to a bona fide man-eater. The author described the female friend who spent hours a day on the service called The Source. He calls her by her handle. It was just a hobby, she said. Maybe I would eventually get some dates out of it. Under the spell of her dirty talking alter ego, she began to undergo a metamorphosis. She ceased to be a shy type of person, and she became the kind of person that could keep a dozen or more online sessions of chat going at one time. The effects began to carry over into her real life. She began regaling me with descriptions of her ever-expanding work. Her speech became bawdier. Her jokes became naughtier. In short, she was becoming who she was pretending to be. Surfing was the new cruising, and it could change lives. In health class, the point of our endless discussions was to scare us off of sex for at least a few years. But the safer substitutes for sex to be found online offered a whole new kind of temptation. To talk or type about sex constituted its own kind of intimacy. As more and more Americans got online in the early 90s, they learned how to enjoy relationships that were text only. Pioneering cyber citizens developed forms of dating that were all talk. And of course, we see this now. Here it is, over 20 years later, right? Or close to 20 years later. And most relationships start off with online communication, or as the young people say, sliding into the DMs, right? Or that person saying, people don't even start off, for most part, most young people don't even start off relationships anymore with a text message. Most of them are starting relationships through sliding in someone's DM and using the wave emoticon. I know for a while, people on Facebook were using the poking, what do you call it? The poking apparatus on Facebook. And really that was initially supposed to be like, someone tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, how are you? I see you online. But that became a whole other phenomenon and use. So now what was not the norm has become the norm in terms of how people initially start a relationship. So if you start a relationship by text these days, or you start a relationship by Instagram liking, or you start a relationship by, good morning, Pastor Ben, or you start a relationship by DMing someone, then don't be surprised when your relationship ends in the same manner. Like there are people who text their breakup, or they DM their breakup and say, hey, I don't want to see you anymore. And there are people that block you from all social media once they are done with you in a relationship. So our relationships have become very digitalized, very impersonal in that way. In 1990, only 200,000 households in the United States had internet connections. Think about that. Only 200,000 people. By 1993, that number was 5 million. The upward climb has continued to 43 million in 2000 and 85 million in 2013. And it continues to climb because as the technology gets better and cheaper, more services will be offered for free, right? You now have whole communities where before you could barely find one computer in the library and everybody had to wait to use that one computer or that 3 computers to get online. Now you have it where libraries are building entire computer rooms to say, we want our community to have access to the internet, even if they don't have it in their homes. When the price of personal computers dropped dramatically in the 90s, many families acquired more computers and moved them out of their living room, out of supervision site, into bedrooms and private places. There, the experimentation really began. In many ways, the liaisons between early online boyfriends and girlfriends followed the pattern set by early generations of daters. You met by chance. After crossing paths in a chat room, if you hit it off, you could start making appointments to come online at the same time and talk together. This opportunity could be life-changing. In some chat rooms, disabled singles who found it physically challenging to go out or hook up in real life, #IRL, connected and fell in love. In others, queer teens who felt isolated in the homes they were growing up in could do the same. This was no small thing. By the time one graduated, 1 in 6 Homosexual students who went to high school in the late 90s would get beaten up so badly that they needed medical attention at least once. So, the ambiguous setting of cyber dating made many people less nervous. At the turn of the 20th century, tough girls and other early daters upset their parents and the police by taking a process that had already been conducted in private to the streets. For the first time in history, dating let young people seek mates and life partners on their own behalf in public places. Spaces like bars and boardwalks shared many features in common with chat rooms. Both were enticing despite being slightly dangerous. Or was it because they were dangerous? Risk was a part of their appeal. Sure, people worried about other people misrepresenting themselves. A cyber lover might say they were tall and strong when in fact they were short and skinny and weak. This was the price of freedom. Back in the day, in your parents' parlor or at church or synagogue, you would attend a sponsored dance, and any other young person you met would have been screened in advance. So back in the day, when your guardians controlled things, they would have screened the people who were attending to make sure that you weren't running into some crazy, maniacal serial killer. But no, the generations didn't want that anymore. They wanted to control their own choices. And so with that trade-off, they were trading safety for freedom. All right? A penny arcade or Nickelodeon was anonymous. The man who held your hand as you shuddered through the dark tunnel of love could be anyone. But daters soon discovered that the anonymity of being out in public offered its own kind of intimacy. Without family and friends hovering over you, you could be yourself and frankly express your feelings. It was the strangers on a train thing. If they weren't into it, who cared? You never had to see this person or pick them up ever again. Early on, mental health professionals started observing that meeting strangers online often had a similar effect. The psychiatrist Esther Gwinnell decided to write a book about computer love. After a string of patients came to her office reporting that they were or their partners had fallen for a stranger online. In online seduction, she coined a phrase for the kinds of relationships that her patients struck up. They were uniquely intimate because they grew from the inside out. Gwinnell's patients said some version of the same thing again and again. The relationship is all about what is happening inside of the soul and mind, and the body doesn't get in the way. We met our souls first. This was the benefit of cyber dating, especially for singles who felt insecure in the flesh. The downside was that in the absence of visual cues or social context, it was often difficult to tell your interlocutor from the person you hoped he or she might be. The cyber love of your life could turn out to be little more than a mirage or a private psychosis. When internet lovers leave the computer to go to other activities, they may feel as though the other person is inside them. Finding your soulmate online could also leave you feeling dissatisfied in real life. The psychiatrist warned that cyber sex addiction would mess up your pre-existing relationships by giving you unrealistic standards and stimulating insatiable appetites. Good morning, Lady Ravonda. Your husband will never understand you as well as your online husband will understand you if the online one lives mostly in your head. Even the lithest and gamest wife will not be able to help you realize all that a pornographic scenario or alternate sex bondage peep shower offers at a glance. What's more, the rapid fire pace of online love raises the stakes of every communication. Gwinnell observed that her patients who were in computer love seemed to vacillate between paralyzing anxiety and exuberance beyond all proportion. We all know this cycle. Compose, write, revise, send, wait, fret, read, reread, and repeat. It is easier than ever now to spend hours poring over the online ephemera of a new crush or partner. Who has not attached operatic levels of hope and fear to the details of status updates and old photographs? Look at the guitar he is holding. We knew he had a good job, but he must also be artistic. The picture with his niece proves how good he is with kids. So all of this imagination comes forth based on the persona that a person is putting online. And as many people will tell you, what someone shares online many times is the highlight reel of their life. It is not their whole life. Very few people share every single detail there is to know about their life. So if you're only going by an online persona, you are getting a skewed perception of who that person really is until you meet them and until you actually become a part of their real life. The problem of interpretation rarely occurs to us until later, when we realize that maybe the guitar in the picture wasn't his, but it belonged to his ex-girlfriend, and the child is not his niece, but is actually his child from a previous relationship. Love in this new medium trained people to let out sighs of ecstasy at every email and every post. It left many computer users less in love with this or that particular partner and more in love with the internet itself. In the 1990s, mainstream news sources told two kinds of sensational stories about online romance. One focused on improbable triumphs of cyber love, or as countless articles punned, love at first bite. In April 1996, the world's first digital wedding took place when a 34-year-old man named Bob Norris married 27-year-old Catherine Smiley in Times Square. The couple had met in a chat room the previous August. New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani officiated. Their vows were transmitted in real time on a message strip that the Joe Boxer Company had added to its 6,000 square foot billboard for this occasion, and from there to the internet. Other tales of digital love were darker. There were accounts of online affairs splitting up previously happy marriages. Even more prominent were horror stories about online predators, which is one of the major things that women especially still have to watch out for and are vulnerable to. In many ways, fears that these inspired resembled the white slave panic that had struck around the dawn of dating, when many do-gooders warned young women that to accept a date was to put yourself in grave danger. In the late 1990s, newspapers and magazines were filled with stories about online predators preying on white suburban children in particular. Often the heroes of these stories were online vigilantes who took it upon themselves to police chat rooms. In the early 2000s, the news show Dateline NBC created a whole reality series dedicated to this premise. Collaborating with a watchdog group called Perverted Justice, the staff of To Catch a Predator would impersonate underage people online. They approached users saying that they were 13 or 14. After a few sessions of hot and heavy typing, the decoy child would suggest meeting in real life. If the adult accepted, they would find themselves confronted live on camera and would be arrested by the police. While a few cases of abduction and abuse surely did happen, they weren't as common. Now we're actually seeing a rise and an uptick. Early studies of chat rooms showed that some users misled the people they spoke to online, usually about their physical appearance or marital status. And of course, cyber sexters put on naughty personas, and people were in fact more honest with strangers than they were in real life. This was an accelerated intimacy that was the problem. It was addictive. Online dating addicts were often the butt of jokes, especially if they were still in high school. They made for easy targets. But in retrospect, what was risible about cybersex was not that it was the perverted part. It was the fact that it was so unproductive. It rarely created real-world couples. Most participants never met IRL in real life. And it squandered enormous amounts of potentially valuable attention. The pioneers who commercialized the internet rightly saw this wastefulness as an opportunity. When America Online and Prodigy introduced their services in the 90s, they offered a slew of lifestyle chat rooms aimed at singles because they recognized that such conversations would be a huge draw. They quickly found ways to derive enormous profit from platforms where people could exchange erotic and romantic attention. Tech companies still do. So let's be honest. It's not like we don't still spend hours using our computers and other devices to stalk love interests. Someone wrote, he tweeted twice today and he still hasn't emailed me back. She stopped and shook her head at her own absurdity. I know that, and I don't even follow him on Twitter. It's not like it's any less pathetic to check the account of someone you met once than it was to log on to a chat room hoping that the handle you cybertext with last week might turn up. It's no less lonely. It's just less stigmatized because now the economy runs on these kinds of feelings of people searching people they used to date, people searching people they used to be in friendship or relationship with, people looking for people online. All of your ads are depending on how much time you spend online and how much time you spend scrolling and how much time you spend wasting your time, because for them, time is money. And so if you spend a lot of your day online, those advertisers are counting on your eyes seeing their products, seeing their cyber commercials, especially if you watch a lot of video online, right? It used to be where Facebook would not allow ads. And then, slowly but surely, Facebook started allowing ads. So you would see in your timeline, you would see your friends that you're interested in. And then what happened? You started seeing ads or sponsored by. Then Facebook took it another further and said, not only are we going to stick ads and interject ads of things you don't want to see in your timeline, now on your videos that you do want to watch, we're going to say your video will be back in 9 seconds, 8 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. And so now you're being forced, because of the power of advertising dollars, you're being forced to see commercials online that you wouldn't have seen before. And you're being forced to see products that you wouldn't see before because of whatever your interests are, of what you're actually online to see or do. So advertisers are taking advantage of that. The same factors that let retailers like Amazon cater to the long-tail economy enabled dating subculture to thrive. In the 1950s, if you were one of the statistically small group of people who longed for a partner to... Okay, I'm not reading that. The internet made it easy to find others who shared your fetish, in summary, or at least propose to others at a lower risk. The safe sex movement gave daters the vocabulary to examine and define their desires. The World Wide Web helped make these desires central to a dating identity. If people had long thought of dating as a form of shopping, like they did during the 90s, they became more educated consumers. They were more likely to know what kind of partner they were in the market for, and they were more likely to share what their desires were. Instead of just happening upon a person, lovers were more apt to sample from a series of redefined and predefined preferences. They were likely to seek relationships with others who had similar interests. As a growing number of niche media channels on cable TV and online displayed different lifestyles, like people enjoy home improvement and they only watch HGTV, just like people who have a niche for cooking and they only watch all the food channels and the cooking channels. The same thing happened with other niche media channels where people who were only interested in certain things, whole channels on cable and cable television began to show those specific lifestyles only. A growing number of sex educators blurred the boundaries between advocacy and advertising. Every dating lifestyle had its own expert. As early as 1987, the feminist Betty Dodson sang the praises of female sexual activity in her book, Sex for One. Like other feminist educators of her time, Dodson traveled the country teaching women and teaching them how to demand from their partners. The long-tail economy ensured that anyone interested could buy her tools. In 1993, the sex educators Claire Cavanaugh and Rachel Venning founded the Sex Toy Boutique. These were toys, and the motivation was noble. There were a few sex shops aimed at women, and the founders wanted to offer the curious information to their customers and encourage them. In 1995, Toys and Babeland started a mail order business with a small print catalog. And then the website followed soon after. The steady business it did generated revenue that allowed them to open outposts in Los Angeles and New York. Now, not only do we have the sex toy industry and the sex shop industry, but now we have, a couple years back, I saw some, I can't remember what channel it was, but they did a whole special on, what did they call them? The blow-up dolls. They have a whole industry for people who enjoy blow-up dolls. And now it's gotten to the point where the blow-up dolls have now grown into robotic dolls. And now the robotic dolls have grown into customize your robotic doll. And how real can you make your robotic doll look? And now the robotic doll has added language to it. It now speaks to the customers. So all of this is centered around people's sexual desires and their proclivities. All of these businesses began to crop up based on America's sex industry. If we were in the Old Testament, people would compare us to Babylon, right? I don't know who is knocking on my door. But let me pause for a moment. Excuse me, everyone.
We're working next door before this all got rebuilt. So I mean, we thought they were working on associations that develop this like
All right. So, back to what I was saying. So, this whole industry began to crop up because of people's sexual proclivities and sexual desire. The internet made it possible to corner a national niche market as long as you understood people's tastes specifically enough. Whatever your thing might be, you no longer had to yearn for it alone. In 1991, a good friend of a gay video store clerk named Dan Savage told him that he was leaving Michigan, where they both lived, to move to Seattle and start a weekly newspaper. Savage jokingly pitched the friend an advice column and was invited to go with him. That column that he wrote for The Stranger was irreverent and hilarious. It got national syndication and soon turned Savage into a celebrity. He went on to write books upon books of relationship advice, and as of 2006, to host a podcast that still has thousands of followers. Savage Love brings the specificity of the checklist to the advice column genre, promising to help readers navigate a seemingly infinite array of sexual preferences. When readers inquired after sexual acts that did not have names yet, he actually invented them. Knowing and expressing one's sexual taste, Savage told his audience, was a key part of dating. Better to confess a penchant very early on than to risk suffering through decades of love. Better to know what kind of relationship a new crush is seeking before discovering a painful mismatch. If you wanted to be happy, you had to learn to understand your desires and express them clearly. If you did, you could renegotiate the terms of conventional romantic relationships, even marriage. Savage has long recommended a model he calls monogamish to long-term couples. It means what it sounds like. The partners agree in advance that each is allowed to sleep with other people occasionally as long as they do not allow it to threaten their primary relationship. Savage insisted that most long-term relationships are monogamish already. Couples are simply unwilling to admit it. Other advice experts took things a little bit further. In the 1990s, we saw a surge of interest in the term polyamory, maintaining multiple open and fluid relationships. And now this notion of polyamory is in the church. So, ladies and gentlemen, you better make sure you have a conversation with the person that you're interested in, and make sure that you're not getting into a relationship of polyamory where they want a fluid and open relationship and you want a marriage. You know, the biblical kind. You know, one man, one wife, you, the person, and God in the marriage. Well, there's a lot of people that think polyamory is appropriate for the church. So you better make sure that you have a conversation about this. Yes, and was told that someone got advised to do this by an elder. Yeah, I mean, Prophet Jonathan. Let me say this real quick. Let me put a caveat in this conversation. There are a lot of people who are operating in sex cults in Christendom. Let me just sip my drink on this. There are a lot of people who are operating in sex cults in Christendom. This is why they have no problem with the earlier conversation that we had when this broadcast first came on. There are a lot of people operating in sex cults in Christendom. It's a serious problem, but they believe it's the norm. It's not the norm, but there are a lot of people operating in it. There are a lot of people swapping spouses. There are a lot of people who go on quote unquote retreats. And you think you're going on a spiritual retreat, but they have a whole other different retreat plan. Yeah. Now there are other broadcasts who cover what's happening on that side of the body of Christ in detail. I don't do that kind of coverage on Daring Dialogues, but there are bloggers who do, who are telling people that this is what is going on and this is what people are involved in. And now you have some bishops who are completely unrepentant about what they're doing, and they're actually trying to defend what they're doing over the pulpit. And some people are just like, well, oh well, I forgive him. Listen, if you're involved in sex cult activity, and if I was under you, I wouldn't be under you. But some people don't care about that. They don't care who their soul is being submitted to. So this kind of stuff is happening. There are people who are part of secret societies. They're part of secret organizations, but they're also a part of the body of believers. And many of the secret societies practice sex cult rituals. It is what it is. And so some of them don't see anything wrong with it because they might be a preacher and they might be a part of a secret society that practices sexual cult rituals. Sometimes people don't want to have the hard conversations with their leaders, but sometimes you just need to ask your spiritual leader, what are you a part of outside of this body? Because listen, I can only speak for me. But if I'm attending a ministry and I look up and I see my leader is involved in secret societies, some of them even wear the rings, letting you know that they're involved in secret societies. They have the rings on. They'll tell you what level they're on, what degree they're on. They're telling you up front that this is what we're a part of. So a lot of times when you see sexual sin happening in that ministry or in that congregation, just understand the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. If there's a lot of sexual sin and sexual misconduct coming out of a ministry, just look at the head. Some of y'all will get that tomorrow. So, needless to say, yep, and justified because the external connection benefits the community. Yep. For those of you who may have missed my broadcast when I talked about it, I grew up with a stepfather who was a warlock, who was a Satanist. So I know you can't tell me that what I don't know and what I didn't live. I know what is involved in secret societies. I know what kind of sexual proclivities they're involved in. There are sexual cult rituals that they participate in. So if you're calling yourself a spiritual leader and you heading up that kind of organization, you're a part of it. There's no separating that. There's vows and rituals. There's vows that you take part in, and there's rituals that you participate in. Now, you might have a congregation that overlooks what you're participating in outside of services, but the reality is you're part of it too. So, needless to say, with all of these customized sexual trends happening, many Americans were horrified. Around the turn of the millennium, conservatives came back at these groups and they began to combat what the polyamorous were doing with purity balls and chastity pledges. Conservative parents started hosting alternative proms on public school prom nights, which young women attended with their fathers. At these events, fathers publicly made vows that they would defend the virginity of their daughters. At colleges across the country, students in the True Love Waits movement began wearing purity rings that signaled their commitment to remaining chaste until marriage. The media called these standoffs the culture wars, but culture wars was a misnomer. In the age of the network and the protocol, there was no single American culture left standing to defend. As panic about AIDS subsided from the mainstream, safe sex and the new culture of explicitness remained. The frankness that AIDS activists had inspired and the sense of infinite possibility that the internet had evoked have continued to shape dating into the new millennium. You can make as many chastity pledges as you wish and date only people who also have, but this will just be one consumer choice amongst many others. In the 1990s, the purist and the punk were just two kinks in the long tail of a market that was ever growing, more segmented, and staying open 24/7. Now, two things I want to point out as we close here. The conservatives were pushing back, right, against what was happening with the community of purity. Sadly, while the conservatives were pushing back, while the conservatives were anti-LGBTQ, they were failing to do their own work in their own community. And now we see the incidences of adultery in the conservative wing of America. We see the incidences of hidden homosexuality. Lots of the people that were a part of the whole chastity and purity movement have been outed as closet homosexuals. We see that a lot of the cases of pedophilia that are now coming out, many of the Republican side, the conservative side, congressmen who were about the anti-LGBTQ laws, they're getting caught in pedophile scandals. So a lot of them were doing some of this for political reasons, but the reality is they were doing some of the same stuff that they were coming against their opponents for doing. Most of the old people used to say the only thing open 24/7 or the only thing open after 11 was someone's legs, right? How many of y'all heard that expression or something similar to it? Well, with the internet, the market for dating became open and is now open 24/7. So how do you conduct yourself in an era of time that you're living in where anytime you are connected to the internet, you have access to all sorts of things? David said it this way. He said, "Keep my eyes from beholding worthless things." There used to be a time where it was easier to guard your ear gates. It was easier to guard your eye gates. But now you can be driving up the highway and see all kinds of images on billboards that you're like, oh, I didn't want to see that. Or you can be watching television and all of a sudden a commercial for something will come on and you're like, oh, what in the world are they doing? Or you can be saying, I'm going to watch a family show on television, and they'll throw something in that quote unquote family show and you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. A couple of years back, it was not normal to see male to male sexual acts being portrayed in television. That was not a norm. But guess what? Once they started doing it and people didn't protest it, then more shows and more shows and more shows began to add that couple in, and then add not only the couple, but them kissing. And then they went a step further and said, not only are we going to add them in, not only are we going to add them kissing, now we're going to add in their bedroom scenes. So it just continued to increase and increase and grow in terms of what people are being exposed to. So what does that mean? That means that the more that our culture and our society decides to expose you to the sexual culture that you don't necessarily want to see, the more you have to be intentional about guarding your own heart, guarding your own ears, and guarding your own eyes. And people that believe say you're too deep, it ain't that serious. Yeah. I mean, it may not be that serious to them. It may not be that deep to them. But David said, Lord, help me to keep my eyes from beholding worthless things. Daniel purposed in his heart that there were certain things that he was not going to be a part of. So it goes back down to individual decisions and individual choices. How much of my soul do I want interacting with things that I know that could possibly bring a corruption to my spirit man? Right? We can't force anybody to turn off their television. We can't force anybody to get off the internet. We can't force anybody to decide what websites that they're not going to look at. But I think there are now websites that will help you keep yourself accountable. I think one is called Private Eyes. There's web tools now where you can limit the kind of channels on your that you receive for cable, right? There's tools for your internet where if you have children and you don't want your children just surfing and coming across stuff that you don't want to be explaining to your children just yet that's going on in the world, there are now internet search modifications that you can do so that your children are not subjected to all kinds of stuff. All right? Before you have a chance to have a conversation with your child. Because unfortunately what's happening is the world is doing a lot of teaching before the parents get an opportunity to. So you have to become more intentional about your personal space, guarding your eyes, guarding your heart, and guarding what you listen to. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host today, Shantae Charles. I hope that something I said today was helpful for you. And gentlemen, if you came in late, please go back and replay, because we talked about the trending topic for the Black community that really shouldn't be the trending topic. But we talked about that earlier in the broadcast. I want to thank you for your time and attention. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness, so please go out today and be light. Go meet some people in real life so you don't have to try to figure out whether or not they're real or not. Take care and God bless.